Now we start Mesachas Kiddushin, and Kiddushin means to be betrothed. And we'll see why on our daf. The Gemara is going to tell us why we use the word Kiddushin to mean betrothal. But we know that there's two parts, since we're coming to the last Mesachta and Seder Nashim, and Hashem should give us the strength to do this Seder many times, that we know that there's two parts to a Jewish wedding. There's called the Kiddushin, or it's also sometimes called Erusin. This means engagement or betrothal, and that is the first part. And then there's the second part, which is called the Nisuin, which is the full marriage. So our tractate deals with Kiddushin. Now we have come so far through our tractate, through Seder Nashim. We started with Sota. We actually started with Yevamos, meaning a man dies. And after that, we do Ksugos. Okay, fine. We need to understand the bond. Then we go to Sota. We're talking about the breakup of a marriage, and Gittin, the divorce. And we end on a positive note, Kiddushin, the betrothal, bringing the marriage back together. And it's a special schus to study about Kiddushin during the month of Elul, where we're talking about Aniwa Dodi Udodi. I am from my beloved is from me. We're trying to have a special relationship with Hashem. So it says, Ha'isha niknes b'shalosh drachim. A woman is able to change her status and become married in three ways. Eli and I were studying the Tosfos before we started, and Tosfos asked the question, why does it say Ha'isha? Sometimes it says Isha and sometimes Isha. And so Tosfos says there's no real reason that the Tana just speaks b'fum riyata, lashon hariyuto b'peh, whatever is going to accompany. But that's the second answer. The first answer of Tosfos is referring to a specific woman that was listed in the Torah, ki yikach ish isha. So a specific woman referring to in the Torah. So Isha niknes. A woman is able to change her status. Niknes, sometimes we have the word kinyan, which means acquire, but here it doesn't mean a woman is not acquired. We don't acquire human beings. It means she changes her status from a single, from a penuya, to become a married woman in one of three ways. The kones atzma, and she changes her status back from being married, betrothed, to being single, b'shtei drachim, in two ways. How is she niknes? How does she change her status and become married? The kasef b'shtar babiyah, with money. If the man gives her money and says, "Behold, you are married to me," harayat mikudeshetli, behold, you're married to me with this money, and that's the way we do it today. B'shtar, with a contract. He writes in the contract, harayat mikudeshetli, or babiyah, or if he says. He comes to be with her, and he says, Rashi says, Ba'ila, v'amar iskadishli b'biyazu. He says, become betrothed to me with this biyah. Those are the three ways in which she changes her status and becomes betrothed. Beis Shammai omrim, so when it says, b'kasef, when it says with money, Beis Shammai says, b'dinar or b'shavei dinar. This is with dinar, or the value of a dinar. Beis Hillel says, b'pruta or b'shava pruta. Pruta, or the value of pruta. Here too, Eli and I were studying the Tosfos, and there are two things to point out from these Tosfos. First thing is, why does it say the value of a pruta if we know pruta? Why does it need to say pruta if we say the value of a pruta? And in fact, in Bamitzia and Azav, it says the value of a pruta itself. So why does it say pruta here also? Tosfos says because we want to highlight the distinction between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. That Beis Shammai says, what is kasef? Kasef is a dinar, which is a greater amount than a pruta, which is a copper coin. Now, Tosfos also points out that this is one of the leniencies that are listed in the Mishnah and Eidos that list the leniencies between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. Why is this a leniency of Beis Shammai? Because if the woman commits adultery, Beis Shammai would say she's not married if she was just mekudeshes with a pruta. She has to be with a dinar, so therefore this could end up being a huge leniency to her that she's not married. Ironically, Beis Shammai, the lenient position is to say she's not married. The kama pruta, what's a pruta? Echa mishmona be'isar italki, 1/8 of an Italian isar. V'kones atzma, and she is able to change her own status from mekudeshes, from an arusa, to become a penuya, beget, b'misa sabal, through either the husband giving her a get. We just spent 89 days on this with Maseches Kitin, or with the death of her husband. The death of her husband. What's the death of her husband? So that is, if her husband dies, she's no longer married. And she's a penuya. Hayavama, well, let's say the woman was married and her husband died without any children. She falls to her husband's brother. That's called yibum. So hayavama, how does the yibum take place? Hayavama niknes bebia. She is able to change her status through bia, meaning to say, even though rabbinically that the brother-in-law can marry her, the yavam can marry her through mamar, he's able to be mekadesh her rabbinically, and that's enough to prohibit her from being with anybody else. But biblically speaking, it has to be through bia. Vikones atzma bechalitza, and even though rabbinically speaking, if he gives her a get, if the yavam gives her a get, she's not allowed to be with anybody else. But really, the only way she leaves that relationship of being a shomeres yavam is through the chalitza, which is where she removes his shoe and spits on the floor. Uva misa yavam, or if the brother who's waiting for yibum with her, if he dies. Aisha niknes. So now we said the woman acquires her status. That's what our Mishnah said. Aisha niknes. So Gemara asks the question, why over here does it say the woman Aisha niknes? The second chapter begins of Kiddushin with the man is betrothed. There's two distinctions between our Mishnah here and the Mishnah there. Here it says, referring to the woman, and it says she is niknes, her status is changed. Whereas there it says the man is mekadesh, the man betroths her. So why do we have this fundamental distinction? Mar explains, Mishum de kabayla misne kesef. The reason why it says here the language of niknes as opposed to mekadesh is because the Mishnah wants to tell us that the way she changes her status is through kesef, through money. And so therefore kesef is a language of kinyan. And how do we know that kesef acquires? The Gemara says because the Gemara is going to tell us through Ephron, and that's called a kinyan. And so therefore the Tana here uses an expression of the kinyan. Kinyan is a way of acquiring something. So the kesef minon, and how do we know that kesef works to change her status from a penuya to a arusa? Because it says that a man takes a woman, and also the same word kach appears by Ephron, because it says, nasati kesef hasadeh kach mimeni. And there we know that Ephron has changed the status of the field by giving it to Abraham for money. The kicha ikri kinyan, and we know that kicha is called a kinyan, and therefore we use the language of the isha nifnis, because it says hasada shekona Abraham, the field that Abraham was kona. So first of all, we should say at the beginning that this is a psicha to the Masechta. It's an opening to the Masechta. And some commentaries say, and this is not just in this case, but a lot of the psichos of different Masechtos were maybe later additions, or there may be introductory lectures by Talmud professors, but they're not necessarily integral to the whole tractate. Alternative version of how do we know that Kasef is called a kinyan, because it says Sados ba Kasef Yiknu. It's by Jeremiah, chapter 32. And Jeremiah, when he was, Jeremiah, when the whole land of Israel was being exiled, all the people there were being exiled to Babylon, God says, go buy fields and write it down in a book. And we want this to last forever. And there it says, Sados ba Kasef Yiknu. So we see that when we say money, it's an expression of kinyan. So therefore, for all these reasons, Tani Isha niknes. Therefore, it says over here, a woman is niknes, which means she changed their status through money. Gemara asked the question. So therefore, in chapter 2, why don't we use the same language? V'nisni hasam ha'ish kona. So why don't we use in chapter 2 the same question about ish kona? So the Gemara says, Mikara Tani Lishna Dioraisa. First, the Torah uses the language of Dioraisa, i.e., niknes. The Torah's language. The Talmud uses the Torah's language as the language of Dioraisa. On Besof Tani Lishna Derabbanim. In the end, it uses the language of the rabbinic, which is Mekadesh. The Gemara says something beautiful. My Lishna Derabbanim. Why is this Ish Mekadesh the language of the rabbis? Talmud says because the Asura Kuli Alma Kehektish, because the Torah prohibits her on everybody like Hektish. Just like when you consecrate something to the temple, it's permitted only to the temple, but prohibited upon everybody else. So too, when you consecrate, when you betroth your wife, she's prohibited to everybody else, but she's permitted to you. That's what Tosu says. Meaning to say you'll be betrothed to me. You're with me forever. So the Gemara asked the question, okay, fine. We know we have to use the language of Kinyan because it relates to Kasef. And later on we use the language of Mekadesh because it's the rabbinic language. But why don't we say here, Ha'ish Kona, the man is Kona? Why do we say it in the passive? The woman is Niknes. Mar explains, Mishum de Kabbalah Misne Seifa, because we want to say the next clause. The second clause, we want to say the Konas Atzma, Bidida, that since the only way she could be acquiring or changing her status is through herself. So since that's the only way it could be done is through herself, so therefore, Tani Nami Reisha Bedida. So therefore, the first clause is also taught through herself, Isha Niknes. Gemara says, but wait, V'nisne Ish Kona Umakne. Well, why don't we just say the man is Kona, and he's also Makne? He grants her. He either changes her status to be with him, or he changes her status to give her own, to become single again. Why don't we say that language? Ish Kona Umakne. And then you don't have to say Ha'isha Kones Atzma. You could say the Ha'ish Makneosa. Mar says because, well, the man isn't necessarily going to be the one to give her own status. Mishum de'ika misa sabal. Because sometimes the man doesn't do anything. He just dies. And the lav iu kamakne. He's not granting her status. It's min hashamayim. That comes from heaven. The man might think has the ability to control her. No, but heaven is. The heavens are the one that grant her status. We buy a same alternative answer. Itana Kona, if it said Ha'ish Kona. By the way, every line here is so powerful. There's a lot of Mr. Haskell's to it. If it would say Ha'ish Kona, then you know what we might have thought. I might have thought that the man can acquire her, so to speak, change her status and force her to be married to him, even against her will. But that's not the case. The woman has to accept. Tana Isha Niknes. So it says the woman changes her status, means to say midaita. It has to come from the Isha. She has to agree. Midaita in, shlo midaita lo. It's only if she agrees does she change her status, not without her agreement. So then the Gemara asks the fundamental question, my area, the Tani Shalosh. Why does it say an expression of Isha Niknes B'Shalosh Drachim, which is, why does it say Shalosh? Why does it say three? Lisnei Shlosha. It should say Shlosha, which is in the masculine. Why does it say Shalosh, which is in the feminine? It should say like the Shas normally says Rashi. It should say it in the masculine. Shlosha, which is the masculine. Rashi says Pirish Mishum, Tosa says Mishum Kol Torah Kula B'Lashon Zafar Nemra. Usually the default is the Torah speaks in an expression of the masculine. The Gemara answers Mishum Kabayu Misnei Derech, because it wants to use Aisha Niknes B'Shalosh Drachim, wants to use the word Derech, path, and path is feminine. So the Gemara says, and how do we know that? And you shall teach them the path, and they will walk on it. Ba, not bo, in the feminine. The Gemara says, you mean to say derech is feminine? It's not that which we learned in the Mishnah in Zavin. B'shiva drachim bodkin es azav. Azav is a man who has a flow, and if we want it, and that he has to bring, if he has a certain flow, he has to bring a carbon. So, however, if he got the flow from his body through something, circumstances that were external, we say he's exempt. And there are 7 external factors that could possibly mitigate against the flow. The Shiva Drachim Bodkin es Azav, and that's in the masculine. So Nisni Sheva, why don't we say in the feminine? So we know that the word Shiva is masculine and Sheva is feminine. It should say in the feminine. Where it says Mishum Kabbalah Nisni Derech. So the Gemara says, well, in that case, why does it say Drachim in the masculine? Because we want to say the word derech. And we know that derech, path, is often in the masculine because it says, "B'derech echad yetzuei racha." We're going to, God willing, read this in Ki Tavo. We have to read Ki Tavo before the end of the year. As the curse is, it says, in one path they'll come out to you. B'shiva drachim yarnusu. But before we say the tochacha, we're going to read the brachos before the tochacha. It says, in one path they'll come out to you, and in 7 paths they'll run away from you. The shiva drachim yanusu lefanacha. In 7 paths they'll run away from you. So we see that drachim is in the masculine. So the Gemara says, Yachol kashu kraya adati. So we have 2 psukim that contradict each other because it says that b'derech echad, which is in the masculine, and it says v'odata masaderech, which is in the feminine. And also masnisin kashikra adadi kashin navi masnisin adadi. And the Mishnayos contradict because our Mishnah is in the feminine, isha niknes b'shalosh drachim, and the Mishnah in Zav is in the masculine, b'sheva drachim bodkin es azav. So why do we do this? So the Gemara explains. Kraya adadi lo kasha, and the psukim that contradict each other are not difficult. Hacha de B'Torah kai, B'Torah ikri wash nekeva. When it says v'odatem b'masaderach asher yelchu ba, v'odatem b'masaderach yelchu ba, that's referring to the Torah, and the Torah is called feminine because it says Torah Hashem tamima. The Torah Hashem is pure. Mishivas nefesh, it restores the soul. So kasav b'lashen nekeva. So it says it in the feminine. Hasam the Milchama Kai, but in the pasuk from Kisavo, which is in referring to going out to battle, there the dark will show Ishla so it's Milchama, the dark will show Isha so it's Milchama. It's the path of a man to go out to war and not the path of a woman. Therefore, Kasav B'Lashen Zachar. So therefore writes it in the masculine. So the Gemara says, well, what about the Mishnayos? The fact that our Mishnah is in the feminine, and the Mishnah in Zavin is in the masculine is also not difficult. Why? Here in our case, where it refers to the woman, since it's talking about a woman changing her status, it says it in the feminine. Hasam Dilgabe Ishka, but with respect to a Zav, it's referring to a man. The Darko Shal Ishli Badek, being Darko Shal Ishli Badek. Because it's the way of the man to have to check why he has a flow. Because by a woman, we don't care about external factors causing her to bleed. It's only by the man that if there are 7 things that could cause him to bleed, that there are external factors, and we say in ones and it's not a zav, but those don't reflect the woman. So therefore, the isha nami ba'ones mitami, even if she got the flow as a result of external factors, we still say she's a zava. So therefore, Tani Lashon Zachar. So therefore, that Mishnah in Zavin refers to it in the masculine. So the Gemara says, well, so what's the whole reason why we say shalosh in the feminine? My time at Tani Shalosh. What's the whole reason why we say shalosh in the feminine? Mishum drachim, because we want to say there are three ways, and derech is in the feminine. So if that's the case, nisni dvarim, nisni shlosha. Why don't you just change the word from derech to dvarim, and then say three in the masculine? Gemara says, I'll tell you why. Mishum the kabayla misnei bia, and because it wants to say that one of the three ways in which you can be mekadesh a woman is through bia, through relations. Bia ikri derech, and bia is called derech because the derech gever be'alma, the way of a man with a young woman, derech gever be'alma. So therefore we see that bia is referred to as derech. Kain derech isha mina efes, and that's another pasuk. And the other pasuk is so too the woman is in the next pasuk. Just like a man is with a young woman, so too the way of a woman who is adulterous, the pasuk says, "Achol machtapia." She eats and she wipes her mouth, and she says, "I didn't commit a sin." So we see that derech is referring to bia. Gemara says, "Hatenach bia." Okay, so bia is called derech, but kesef ishtar ma'ikol meimar. So why do kesef, money, and the contract also have to be referred to with derech? Why aren't they referred to with davar? And then you could say b'shlosha dvarim. The Gemara says, no, we say derech because of bia. Mishum bia. Because of bia, we use the word derech. The Gemara says, v'tani tarti atuchada, but there's two against one. And kesef and shtar could use davar, and bia is derech, but it's 2 versus 1. They should outrank the bia. The Gemara says, hanach nami tzorach bia ninhu. The whole purpose of the kesef and the shtar is to lead you to this concept of bia. And so therefore, it's not 2 versus 1. It's one primary source, which is bia. The bias or alternatively, money Rabbi Shimon, or else we could say that who is our Mishnah? Like our Mishnah is like the position of Rabbi Shimon, the Tanya Rabbi Shimon Omer. And here we're going to see one of the most beautiful lines, a very beautiful line from the Talmud. The Ma'amra Torah ki kach ish isha. Why does it say in the pasuk when a man literally takes a wife, ki sila kach isha ish, and it doesn't say when a woman takes a man, which would imply that she goes out and chooses him. Why does it have to emphasize that the man is taking a wife? Why doesn't it say that the woman takes a husband? So the Gemara explains, because the way of the world is that a man goes out pursuing a wife. But the woman doesn't need to go out looking for a husband. It's like a man. He lost the precious object. Ami, who's looking for whom? So the person who owned the object is going out and looking for it. And so too, the lost object doesn't look for its owner, but the owner looks for the lost object. And what's the concept here? The concept here is that Hashem created Eve from the rib of Adam. And so therefore, they were intertwined, and now he lost her. And so therefore, the man is missing something. The man is missing something if he doesn't have his wife. So therefore, he has to go out and look for her. Gemara says, and so therefore, according to Rabbi Shimon, that's the way of the world. The man looks for the wife. And so therefore, it says, drachim, because it says it's a path. He's the way of the world. That this is darka shel ish lachzor darko shel ish lachzor al isha. So therefore, it uses the word derech. Gemara says v'hadetanam b'zayin drachim bodkim es hazav. But what about by the zav? Why does it say 7 ways? It should say dvarim. That's what the Gemara says. Why does he use the word derech there? Why doesn't he use davar? So according to that, a second approach. Listen to Devarim, where it says Hasam Akamashmo, and there it's teaching us that what causes the Zav to have his flow, the man to have his flow, the darko the Michla Yisera Lasuya Ziva. Because if you eat too much, the man's going to have a flow. The darko the Mishtaya Yisera Lasuya Ziva. And if the woman, and if he drinks too much, he's going to have this flow. The Gemara says, well, what about the following case? Well, Esrog Shavel Elon. Begimel drachim, and esrog is similar to a tree in three ways. Rashi says, with respect to the arla and the netaravai, it's like a tree that you count the way you figure out a tree. With respect to the sabbatical year, we go after the budding like a tree and not like a vegetable. And it is like a vegetable. Why doesn't it say Dvarim there? The reason why we don't say Drachim, why we don't say Dvarim is because we want to say in the next clause, it's like a Yerek in one way. What's the one way that when you collect it, that's when you tithe it? That we don't go after the budding. So the Gemara says Seifa Nami Nisnei Davar. Why don't we say in the Seifa also? Why don't we say Davar? The Gemara says Hasam Akamashmon. The darka de esrog ki yerek is teaching us that the way of an esrog is like a yerek, like a vegetable. My yerek darko ligado kol mayim. It's like a vegetable. It needs to be irrigated. Af esrog darko ligado kol mayim. B'shas likutaso isura. And so too the esrog it has the way to be gathered by. It needs irrigation, and also. When you collect it, that's when you tithe it. Okay, so we just do a couple more ones, finish 2 dots. Koi. A koi is this animal that we're not sure if it's a chaya or a behema. That this koi, this animal, yesh bo drachim shavo chaya, yesh bo drachim shavo behema. In some ways it's similar to a wild animal, in some ways it's similar to a behema. And there's some ways it's not similar to a chaya or a behema. Why don't we say they're dvarim? Why are we saying drachim? And what about the fact that we just learned this in the Mishnah in Gittin? This is one of the ways in which the Gittin of women is similar to the document of emancipation of slaves. So how does your principle apply? So Gemara explains wherever there is distinction between it, meaning to say it's similar to this way, and this way, and this one, and this way, then we use derech. Tani drachim. But wherever there's no distinctions between the two cases, tani drachim. The kolhech deleka pukta tani dvarim. And dekanami, indeed, we can infer the Ketani Sefer Rebbe Lezer Omer Esrog Shevel Elon would call davar. Esrog is like the tree for everything, because there's no distinction. He used the word davar and not derech. Shma mina. And we'll stop the recording here. A big shkoyach to everybody for this aschoa on Kiddushin. And we're going to do it again in the morning at 10 a.m. Shkoyach.